I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary. 27 years after Princess Diana's tragic death, Buckingham Palace unveils a secret that could shake the monarchy to its core. During quiet renovations at Kensington Palace, a sealed room is uncovered, untouched since Diana's final days. Inside lies an ornate jewelry box engraved with a haunting message for those who dare seek truth. DS. When Princess Anne is tasked with cataloguing the contents, what begins as royal duty spirals into a chilling revelation of betrayal, cover-ups, and danger. Hidden letters, secret banks, and Diana's own confessions point to a powerful conspiracy she was ready to expose. But someone made sure she never got the chance. As Anne digs deeper, one question echoes louder than the rest. Who really silenced the people's princess? Subscribe, like, and share as we follow Anne's journey from loyal royal to justice-seeking rebel. The truth Diana died protecting may finally come to light. The unexpected inheritance. In the spring of the year 2024, renovation crews descended upon the quieter wings of Kensington Palace. What was meant to be a structural update to one of the oldest sections of the estate quickly turned into something else entirely. Beneath layers of dust and behind a sealed wooden panel, workers uncovered a forgotten room, small, silent, and untouched since the late Princess Diana's final days. It was a chamber of memories, frozen in time. When word reached Buckingham Palace, it was Princess Anne who was summoned. As the most senior working royal, still carrying the weight of duty and known for her discretion, she was the natural choice to oversee the cataloguing of the room's contents. Though Anne had long distanced herself from the spectacle of royal drama, there was no denying the gravity of what had been found. Stepping into the room, Anne was struck by the stillness. Dust clung to elegant evening gowns, boxes of handwritten notes, and framed photos of a woman whose life had been both revered and relentlessly scrutinized. Diana Anne's feelings about her late sister-in-law were complicated. In the beginning, she had dismissed her as too soft, too emotional, too hungry for attention. But over time, behind closed doors and away from cameras, Anne had come to see Diana's fierce devotion to her sons and her causes. There had been moments, rare and unspoken, when Anne had respected her. Thousands of items lay before her, but only one caught her eye. Nestled at the back of a shelf, partially concealed beneath a silk scarf, sat an ornate jewelry box. It was unlike anything else in the room. Intricately carved from dark rosewood and inlaid with delicate pearls and sapphires, it shimmered even under a layer of dust. The craftsmanship was masterful, the aura different, intimate, private. Anne picked it up with a curious frown. The weight of it was oddly heavy, as though it carried more than just jewelry. She turned it slowly in her gloved hands, inspecting the fine details. Then she saw it, an inscription etched subtly into the base of the lid, as though never meant for public eyes. For those who dare seek truth, DS, the initials sent a cold ripple down Anne's spine. Diana Spencer, not even Princess of Wales, just her own name. Personal, defiant. Anne looked around the room again, this time with different eyes. Had Diana left behind more than trinkets and gowns? What truth was she referring to? Why would she hide a message so cryptic inside something so beautiful? Clutching the box, Anne knew this was no ordinary inheritance. It was a puzzle, a message, and possibly a warning. Whatever lay inside was meant for someone bold enough to look beyond appearances. Someone who perhaps too late finally wished she had asked more questions while there was still time. The hidden compartment. Princess Anne sat alone in her private quarters. The jewelry box resting on a velvet cloth before her. Its surface had been polished with care, but her eyes were fixed on the inscription again and again. For those who dare seek truth, those words refused to leave her. And was not one for theatrics. Yet something about the message pulled at her sense of duty, and something deeper she was not ready to name. She opened the lid with steady hands. The contents were breathtaking. Nestled inside were earrings of rare Burmese rubies, a sapphire bracelet that shimmered like starlight, and a pendant of emerald and diamond so precisely cut it seemed to glow from within. But as Anne examined each piece, she noticed something strange. Etched into the back of each item were tiny markings, symbols, dates, and initials that didn't match any royal inventory records she had ever seen. She retrieved a magnifying glass and studied the markings closely. Some resembled coordinates. Others looked like references, maybe case numbers, maybe dates. One brooch bore a number that looked like an international bank code. Her brow furrowed. These were not sentimental keepsakes. They were breadcrumbs. She turned her attention back to the box itself. Her fingers moved instinctively across its grooves and panels, her mind tracing the craftsmanship. Then, by chance, or perhaps fate, her thumb pressed against a raised section near the base. There was a soft click, and the bottom panel shifted ever so slightly. And paused, holding her breath, she slid the panel open. Inside was a second compartment, shallow but tightly packed. It contained a bundle of handwritten letters, faded but legible, tied with a pale blue ribbon. They smelled faintly of lavender. Beneath them lay a cluster of glossy photographs. Diana clearly in disguise meeting with individuals and did not recognize. The backdrops were unfamiliar too. Cafes, underground parking garages, private homes. None of it fit the public life the Princess of Wales was known for. Tucked beneath the photographs was a small silver key. Attached was a tag Zurich Deposit Box 837L, and stared at it stunned. Her heart beat heavier as she turned back to the letters. Her name was written in Diana's looping script on the first envelope to Anne. Please read if I am gone. The date on the corner was chilling. Just 3 days before Diana's death in Paris. And sat down slowly, hands slightly trembling. She unfolded the first letter. The ink had smudged in places as though it had been written in haste. Her eyes landed on the opening line and froze. And if you're reading this, then they succeeded in silencing me. The room spun for a moment. This was not sentiment. This was not a drama. This was a warning from beyond the grave. Anne closed her eyes and took a breath. Whatever truth Diana had uncovered, it was now in her hands, and someone had gone to great lengths to keep it buried. Diana's final confession. The letter trembled slightly in Princess Anne's grasp, but her gaze remained steady. Diana's handwriting filled the page, elegant yet urgent, the strokes slanting forward as if she had been racing against time. And read on, her breath catching as the tone shifted from affectionate to grave. Diana began by recalling a charity gala in the year 1995, the night she first suspected something was wrong. A respected children's foundation, one she had tirelessly championed, had failed to deliver funds to its overseas programs. When she quietly pressed for answers, she was met with evasions, financial misstatements, and eventually threats. The further she investigated, the deeper the rot seemed to go. And turned the page and found a spreadsheet in Diana's own hand, meticulously copied numbers, bank transfers, and anonymized accounts. According to Diana's notes, funds meant for landmine survivors, children's hospitals, and women's shelters had been funneled into personal accounts. Some belonged to powerful businessmen. Others, more disturbingly, had ties to figures within the royal household. Diana's voice in the letter grew colder, more resolute. She wrote about late-night meetings with investigative journalists, one from France, another from Switzerland, who were already sniffing out signs of a larger conspiracy. She mentioned code names, dead drops, and surveillance. She had even begun recording her conversations, storing tapes in undisclosed locations. Whistleblowers had come to her in secret, offering documents and testimony, terrified for their lives. And sat back in her chair, heart pounding. She had never truly imagined Diana capable of orchestrating something like this. For years, she had thought of her as emotionally impulsive. Compassionate, yes, but reckless. But this was not recklessness. This was strategy. This was a woman aware of the predators circling her, documenting every step because she knew they might come for her next. Diana's tone softened in parts of the letter when she spoke of William and Harry. I am not afraid to die, she had written. But I am afraid for them, of what they will be forced to inherit if this truth is buried with me. And blinked away the sting of tears she did not expect to feel. She had misjudged Diana. The final months of her life had not been defined by scandal or sorrow alone. They had been erased to reveal the truth, a desperate mission to protect her sons from the shadowy forces manipulating the crown from within. As she reached the final page, Anne's fingers froze over a single underlined sentence near the bottom. If you find this, Anne, then know I left behind a final insurance policy. Everything hidden in a Swiss bank vault. She looked again at the small key from the hidden compartment, suddenly heavier in meaning. The truth Diana had died trying to deliver was not lost. It was waiting, buried beneath mountains, protected by silence and secrecy. And someone else besides her was likely searching for it, too. The Swiss connection. The private jet touched down in Zurich under cover of early morning fog. Princess Anne had travelled without fanfare, without aids, and without explanation. Only her closest security detail knew her location, and even they had been given a misleading itinerary. The key Diana had left behind was tucked securely in the inner pocket of her coat, resting over her heart like a quiet weight of obligation. The Swiss bank was discreet, centuries old, and used to clients who valued silence above all. And presented the key and the tag with the number 837L. Her voice calm, though her heart drummed in her ears. The bank clerk glanced at her identification, nodded without recognition, and led her through layers of security, each more sterile and silent than the last. Inside a secure viewing room, the box was placed before her. And hesitated for a breath, then opened it. Stacks of documents met her eyes. Ledgers, receipts, financial transfers meticulously compiled. There were color-coded folders and photographs, each labeled in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. But most chilling of all were the tapes and digital discs tucked neatly at the bottom, each marked with a date and a subject. One simply read, "If I disappear," and inserted the first disc into the provided player. The screen flickered and there she was, Diana, seated in what appeared to be a private flat, face bare, eyes tired but focused. She began to speak in a clear voice. "If you are watching this, then I have been silenced. But I want you to know what I found and why I could not walk away." And leaned in as Diana laid out names. Not just faceless businessmen and foreign investors, but members of the aristocracy, men who smiled in press photos and hosted charity balls. Diana described how they used charities as financial fronts, diverting millions to fund arms deals, offshore accounts, and clandestine operations. She had tried to alert officials. Some listened, others warned her off. She detailed how she began to fear the brakes on her car had been tampered with, how she no longer trusted her security detail, how she moved through back entrances and coded her calls. Her eyes brimmed with tears when she spoke of William and Harry. "I must leave them something more than fairy tales," she whispered. "They need the truth." And sat frozen as the video ended. Her stomach churned with horror. This was bigger than she had imagined. An international network intertwined with the very institutions meant to protect the people. Diana had not been paranoid. She had been right, and she had paid the ultimate price. She turned toward the bank clerk who had been waiting outside the room. His expression was unreadable, but his words stopped her breath. "You're not the first to ask about this box," he said quietly. "Someone else came by 2 weeks ago. They claimed to be family." Anne's fingers tightened around the key. The race had begun, and she was no longer the only one holding pieces of the truth. The surveillance begins. Princess Anne returned to London, cloaked in quiet purpose. The Swiss discovery had shaken her to her core. Diana had not only been watching, documenting, and exposing, she had been hunted. And kept the evidence secured in a guarded vault within a private residence far from royal properties. But what she did not know as her plane touched down at Heathrow was that someone was already watching her every move. The first sign came subtly. Her personal phone, one used strictly for family communication, began to click and echo during calls. Then came delays in her mail, letters arriving opened or resealed. Her car, always meticulously maintained, suddenly failed to start in her secure garage. Mechanics later discovered a severed brake line dismissed as rodent damage. But Anne was no fool. She called in an old friend, now retired from British intelligence, to sweep her home and devices. He found traces of tracking malware on her phone and bugs hidden in her study. Someone was listening. Someone knew she had Diana's evidence, and they wanted to know what she would do with it. It was during this rising storm of unease that Anne received a mysterious package with no return address. Inside was only a name, Timothy Radcliffe, Diana's former private secretary. And remembered him, a quiet man, fiercely loyal, who vanished from public life after Diana's death. She tracked him to a modest home outside Bath, and he agreed to meet at night in a chapel known only to a few. In the dim candlelight of the sanctuary, Timothy's face was lined with years of silence. He wasted no time. "Your sister-in-law was not alone," he said. "She trusted a few of us, though she knew had no stake in the machine. We've kept watch, waiting for someone else brave enough to carry the flame." And sat in stunned silence as Timothy laid it bare. The official investigation into Diana's death had been riddled with holes. Evidence was ignored, witnesses silenced. CCTV footage from Paris had gone missing, and reports of the white Fiat seen at the scene were dismissed without cause. "It was never meant to be solved," he said, just quietly closed. The weight of it pressed on Anne's shoulders. Diana had died chasing the truth. And now Anne, by stepping into her shadow, had become the new target. She returned home that evening to find a single envelope slid under her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message brief. "Stop digging or join her." And stared at the words, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. The threat was clear, but what they failed to understand was that fear had never ruled her life. And now that she knew what Diana died trying to reveal, retreat was no longer an option. The ghost of her sister-in-law was no longer whispering from the shadows. She was roaring from the grave, and Anne would not let her be silenced again. The network exposed. Days turned into nights as Princess Anne retreated into the shadows, sifting through Diana's evidence like a scholar unearthing sacred texts. The documents from Switzerland, the letters from Diana, and the quiet testimonies from old allies painted a picture too grim to ignore. Diana had not stumbled into danger by accident. She had uncovered an international operation rooted in royal privilege, cloaked behind the veil of charity and humanitarianism. And compiled timelines, matched names, traced money trails. The deeper she dug, the clearer it became. Diana's global work, her landmine campaign, her visits to war zones and refugee camps had unwittingly placed her on the front lines of something far more sinister. Underneath the photo ops and press coverage, shadowy figures had used royal movements as distractions, conducting arms deals and laundering illicit funds across borders. What hit hardest was the betrayal. Diana had trusted some of these people. She had laughed with them at banquets, spoken of them in interviews, defended them in the press. Yet some had been part of the very machine that sought to destroy her. Among the financial reports were transactions authorized by individuals within the palace's inner circle, and cross-referenced accounts, foundations, and travel records. One name surfaced again and again. Someone whose public image had always been impeccable. Someone and had never suspected. A relative by blood. She felt sick, and contacted Timothy Radcliffe once more. Together, they confronted one of Diana's old friends from the Red Cross, who after much hesitation confirmed what and had feared. Diana had been on the verge of releasing a joint expose with a journalist before her death. A report that would have implicated not just powerful businessmen, but also members of the royal family and government contractors. That report never saw the light of day. The journalist was found dead just weeks after Diana, an apparent overdose. Another closed case. In the final stack of evidence, and unearthed a hidden file labeled Operation Marionette. It included correspondence between foreign security operatives and a private security firm that had once been hired to monitor and deter Diana's movement. The final page included a chilling phrase, "Ensure containment before Paris trip. Risk elevated." Anne's breath caught in her throat. She followed the breadcrumbs further until she reached the final piece, a grainy but untouched surveillance image that had never been made public. It showed the tunnel in Paris moments before the crash. The infamous white Fiat was visible, but behind it, a second car, unidentified, never mentioned, its plates traced back to a company linked to a known associate of a royal staffer. Her hands trembled. This was not speculation. This was confirmation. The crash had not been an accident. It had been staged. And the people behind it were not only alive, they were still powerful, still protected, and still watching. And stood in the silence of her study, one hand resting on the image. Diana had been hunted, and now the hunter's scent was fresh again, the emotional breakdown. The study was silent, except for the quiet crackling of the fireplace. Princess Anne sat alone. The mountain of evidence spread out around her like fragments of a life once overlooked. The image of Diana, smiling, radiant, unknowingly marked, was pinned beside a cluster of documents. Anne's gaze lingered on it, but this time not as a royal official or a skeptical observer. This time, she saw a woman who had screamed without being heard. A single tear slipped down her cheek, surprising her. Anne was not known for displays of emotion. She had lived a life of discipline, of measured distance, and unwavering control. But tonight, she crumbled. She pressed her face into her hands and wept. Quiet, steady sobs for the sister-in-law she had misjudged. For the young woman who had stepped into the lion's den with only her heart and conviction as weapons. And remembered dismissing Diana's fears as dramatics, her intensity as immaturity. But now, every letter, every video, every haunting whisper proved that Diana had been more aware, more courageous, and more isolated than anyone ever knew. I should have seen it, and whispered aloud. I should have asked her. The guilt settled in like a weight upon her chest. Diana had tried to raise the alarm to speak the truth, but the institution, the media, the palace, and herself had all turned away. She had been branded difficult, unstable, attention-seeking, but she had not been seeking attention. She'd been seeking protection for her children. And sifted through one of Diana's final letters again. They will never stop until they own everything Diana had written. Even William and Harry, they're not safe from the rot that grows behind these walls. I don't fear for myself anymore. I fear for what they'll become if no one tells them the truth. And clutched the paper to her chest. The tears returned, hot, silent, and cleansing. For all the pomp and ceremony, for all the tiaras and duties and protocols. This was what had been missed. A mother standing alone in the storm, shielding her children with her own body. Diana had never been a threat. She had been a shield. As Anne stood to collect herself, her phone buzzed. A secured line, she answered. Said Timothy Radcliffe's voice, strained and urgent. There's been movement. And froze. Movement where? At Lamrook, Prince George's school. There was an attempt to infiltrate the grounds. Security stopped it, but it's not a coincidence. We believe the network is targeting the boys now, starting with William's children. You need to get to him now. The line went dead. And stared at the phone, her heart hammering against her rib cage. The danger had never ended. It had simply changed form. And now it was no longer only about the past. The same shadows that silenced Diana were now creeping toward her sons. This time Anne would not stand back. She would fight. The race against time. The moment the call ended, Princess Anne was already on the move. There was no time to alert security through traditional channels. Too many had already been compromised. She contacted only those she trusted. Absolutely. Starting with a retired MI5 director who had once owed Diana a quiet favor. Within the hour, a covert protection team was dispatched to Lamrook, where Prince George was attending classes. Another shadow team was sent to monitor Prince Harry's location in the United States and knew they were running on borrowed time. She left Kensington under the cover of darkness. Her route masked and her communications scrambled. With her were flash drives, original documents, and backup footage. Everything Diana had risked her life to collect. The plan was clear. Expose the network before they struck again. But I knew they wouldn't go down quietly. They had survived too long in the shadows to let truth win without blood. As MI5 began piecing together links between foreign accounts and high-ranking officials and did what she never imagined she would have to, she confronted members of her own family. In a private room within Clarence House, she stood before two senior royals, both of whom were named in Diana's hidden reports. Their expressions were unreadable. Masks of polished civility. You knew what she was uncovering, and said coldly. And you let it happen. One of them shifted uncomfortably. These were complexities far beyond one woman's comprehension. No, and snapped, her voice sharper than they had ever heard it. They were crimes, and now your silence is no longer enough to protect you. She placed a folder on the table. If anything happens to William, to Harry, or to their children, this goes public. Every page, every name, every transaction. The silence that followed was suffocating. One of the men finally spoke, his voice low. You're making enemies you can't even see. I already have, and replied. And I am still standing. Meanwhile, the MI5 teams reported irregular movement near Prince William's private estate. A delivery van, unregistered, had attempted to bypass perimeter security. It was intercepted, but the contents were alarming. Blueprints, surveillance photos, and tampered brakes for a vehicle registered to the household staff. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Back at Sandringham, and watched the live feed as George was escorted from the school grounds under high alert. Her hands trembled only slightly. They were out of hiding now. The network had made its move. An hour later, a black SUV carrying Catherine, George, and Charlotte was forced off a narrow country road. The driver survived. The car was totaled. No serious injuries were reported, but the message had been delivered. This was no accident. It was a warning shot. The next time, they would aim to finish what they started. Anne's face hardened as she watched emergency crews surround the wreck. This was war, and she had already chosen her side, Diana's final victory. The morning after the attempted attack, Princess Anne stood before a podium in a secure briefing room, the world's press watching in hushed anticipation. Behind her, guarded by MI5, were sealed folders, digital archives, and boxes of evidence. All of it extracted from Diana's hidden trove. The truth was no longer buried. It was about to be unleashed. Anne took a breath, steady and strong. For years, we told the world a narrative that was incomplete, she began, voice low, but unwavering. What we failed to tell you, what was kept from all of us, was that Diana, Princess of Wales, died not simply as a symbol of compassion, but as a woman on a mission for justice. The revelation sent shockwaves through the nation. Over the following days, headlines screamed names previously untouchable. High-ranking officials, corporate executives, and even minor royals were arrested or forced to resign. Offshore accounts were frozen. Investigative files once sealed were reopened. The web Diana had uncovered and had brought to light began to unravel. At the heart of it all was a woman once mocked for being too emotional, too impulsive. But now Diana was vindicated. She had not died in vain. She had died protecting the truth and protecting her sons. In the weeks that followed, Anne quietly launched the Diana Truth Foundation, an organization devoted to transparency in global charity, whistleblower protection, and investigative journalism. Its mission was simple. Carry the torch Diana had lit in secret. Her legacy was no longer one of tragedy, but of triumph. One evening, alone in her private study, Anne returned to the ornate jewelry box. In the aftermath of the chaos, it had been set aside, catalogued, preserved, but never fully emptied. Her fingers brushed the velvet lining until they found a small groove. Another click, a panel lifted. Inside was a slim cassette tape in a labeled envelope for William and Harry, "Only if the world finally hears me." Anne's breath caught. She held it for a moment, then placed it in an old player and pressed play. Diana's voice filled the room, soft but steady. "My dear boys, if this message finds you, then I know you've heard the truth. Not just about what happened to me, but about who you truly are. Not symbols, not heirs, but hearts that can change this world. Don't carry fear, carry courage. That's what I tried to do. That's what I hope you'll keep doing for yourselves and for those who never had a voice." Tears welled in Anne's eyes. Diana's final gift was not just the truth. It was love. Timeless, unshaken, and victorious. Princess Diana's final mission was never about fame. It was about protecting truth and shielding her sons from a legacy of silence. Through Princess Anne's unrelenting pursuit of justice, the truth has finally been heard. What was once buried beneath jewels and secrecy is now part of history's reckoning. Diana was not just a princess. She was a whistleblower, a protector, and a mother who never stopped fighting. Subscribe for more untold stories that reveal what history tried to forget. Like and share to keep these voices alive. Every uncovered truth brings us closer to a future where silence no longer wins. Stay with us because the next revelation is already unfolding behind palace doors.